Hello, and welcome to Wholesome Monday, where we are currently deep diving into Nancy's mysterious letter, Nancy Drew mystery number 8. If you have not been with us for any of the previous chapters, every Monday we dive into a chapter of Nancy Drew. We pick it apart. We talk about things we liked, we didn't like, what works, what doesn't work, and then we discuss it down in the comments. And if you don't remember last week, we left off where Nancy ripped her dress and was right about to fall down the stairs. I should say, if you don't have time to watch the video every week here on YouTube, you can check me out on Spotify. The link is down in the description box below, where I post all of these chapters in audio form for podcast listening. And I think that's the entire intro. Without further ado, let's just dive right into chapter 8, which is called Disheartening Request. As Nancy pitched forward, she made a wild grab for the banister of the stairway. Though she swung around and almost lost her grip, Nancy managed to keep from falling. How stupid of me, she chided herself and went on down the stairway. Nancy looked at the big rip in her lovely dress. Could it be mended without showing? Oh, I hope Hannah can do something with it. She finally reached the bottom step and went on to the front door. When Nancy opened it, she was greeted by a grinning little boy. "Hello," said Tommy Johnson. "Hi, Tommy," Nancy replied. "What are you holding behind your back?" she asked. "A surprise," he said. "For me?" "Maybe. You know you promised me a detective badge for helping you." "So I did," said Nancy. "Come in, Tommy. I'll get it for you right away." Nancy hurried off to the dining room, where there was a closet that held all sorts of knickknacks. Among them was a toy detective badge, which someone had given her at a party for a joke. She carried it to Tommy, who took it but still kept one hand behind his back. "Do you like it?" Nancy asked. "Sure I do. Would you put it on me, Nancy? After that, I'll show you what's in my other hand." She pinned the badge onto his heavy sports jacket, then asked, "Have you brought me something exciting?" "It's what you say, a clue," Tommy replied stoutly. From behind his back, he took out a man's rather worn shoe. Tommy explained that his little friend Billy down the street had picked it up. "He saw it fall out of the yellow coat man's car trunk," the little boy explained. "He just told me about it. I thought you might want the shoe, so I promised him some candy if he gave it to me. Do you have some candy?" Nancy laughed and patted Tommy on the head. "Indeed I have, and you shall have some as well as Billy. This is good detective work, Tommy. Keep it up, and maybe someday you'll be a police chief." "Oh boy, that would be something," Tommy replied. Nancy went to get 2 small jars of hard candy. She called them her emergency treats for just such occasions. When she returned, Tommy's eyes expanded. "You mean I can have 1 whole jar, and Billy can have the other?" Nancy nodded. "I think you both earned this reward." Tommy went off, declaring that he was going to hunt for more clues to the yellow coat man. "I hope you don't catch him too soon," he called over his shoulder, and Nancy giggled. After she had closed the door, Nancy looked at the shoe thoroughly. She could see no identification of any sort, but probably the police can find something, she thought. I'll call Chief McGinnis and see what he has to say. Fortunately, he was in his office. "I'd say it's an excellent clue," he told her, "but don't bother to come down here now. Tomorrow will do." Then Nancy climbed the stairs and showed Hannah the rip in her dress. The housekeeper said she was glad Nancy had not been hurt. She looked at the tear for some time. "You really made a good job of this while you were at it," she commented. "Well, take the dress off and I'll see what I can do with it." Nancy said first she would slip on shoes with heels to see if the length of the dress was all right. She found it was, then took off the dress. Hannah turned it inside out. "Good thing this rip is near a seam. It won't hurt to make the skirt a little narrower. I'll just put in a whole new seam." "Oh, you are a darling," Nancy said, and gave the housekeeper a kiss on the cheek. Then she told Mrs. Gruen about the shoe. "It dropped out of the car that we think belonged to Edgar Nixon." The housekeeper said. "I hope that shoe gets out of here in a hurry. I'm sure it's contaminated with bad luck." "Why, Hannah, I've never heard you speak like that before." "I can't help it," the housekeeper replied, starting to baste a new seam in the dress. "The man is no good, and I don't want any of his belongings around here." When she finished sewing, Hannah laid the dress down and announced that she would have to start dinner. Nancy went downstairs to help her. She set the table and prepared a salad of tomatoes and cottage cheese. "I won't put the steak on until your father comes," Mrs. Gruen remarked. Nancy heard a step on the back porch. "I guess you can broil the steak now," she said, moving toward the door. She opened it and her father entered. He kissed her, said good evening to the housekeeper, then beckoned for Nancy to follow him. After he had hung up his coat and hat in the hall closet, he led the way into the living room. The two sat down. "You have news?" Nancy queried. "Yes. It's a mystery to me. Maybe you can figure it out. I had a cable late this afternoon from Mr. Bates Jones." The lawyer hesitated, and Nancy sensed that what he was about to say was not going to please her. Finally he told her. "You and I have been discharged," he said. "Discharged from what?" Nancy asked. "The Nancy Smith Drew case." "You mean they found her?" Nancy cried, astonished. Mr. Drew shook his head. "That's the mystery. The cable said someone else was putting them in touch with Nancy Smith Drew, and that you and I could give up the case." Nancy was amazed. "That's all the cable said?" "Yes." "Well, I think it's pretty abrupt when you have been so nice to make overseas phone calls to him." Mr. Drew smiled. "Cables cost money. Perhaps Mr. Bates Jones will follow his message with a letter of explanation." Nancy thought this over. Intuition told her that there was something quite unnatural about the whole thing. "What's on your mind?" her father asked. "Well, I think something phony is going on." "You mean the cable?" her father asked. "No, but I just have a strong hunch that there might be a fake Nancy Smith Drew posing as the real one." The matter was discussed later with Hannah Gruen, who was inclined to agree with Nancy. "Call it woman's intuition if you like," she said. "If I were you, I wouldn't let it drop here." "Perhaps you're right," Mr. Drew said. "I'll telephone to Mr. Bates Jones in the morning and see if he will give me more details." "May I be there when you make the call?" Nancy asked. The lawyer smiled. "I'll make it from here before I leave for my office. I'd like you to hear what's said." Directly after breakfast the following morning, Mr. Drew put in the call to London. He had to wait several minutes before being connected with the lawyer there. Mr. Drew explained that he and Nancy did not want to go against Mr. Bates Jones' wishes, but were calling to find out if the real Nancy Smith Drew had been located. "We have some good leads to her ourselves," Nancy's father said, "so your cable was a great surprise." Nancy, who was seated near the phone, could hear the answer plainly. "We appreciate your great interest in all the trouble you have gone to," Mr. Bates Jones said. "But we have had a communication from an American detective agency that for a fee they will tell us the secret whereabouts of the heiress." Mr. Drew frowned. "But how did they learn you're looking for her?" "That we don't know, but we have no reason to believe the firm is not telling the truth." "Perhaps I could be of help to you," Mr. Drew said, "by looking up this agency. It's just possible that a thorough investigation might be to your advantage." There was a long pause. "Well," the London lawyer finally said, "I think it best not to divulge the name." Nancy and her father looked at each other. This certainly was a brush off. Before saying goodbye, Mr. Drew added, "Frankly, Mr. Bates-Jones, my daughter and I are very suspicious about this. I advise you not to part with any money until the whole thing has been thoroughly investigated." There was a loud exclamation at the other end of the wire. Finally, the London attorney said, "Thank you for your advice, Mr. Drew. I will talk to my partner about the case and let you know the result." When the conversation had ended, Mr. Drew said he must hurry off. After he had gone, Nancy settled down in a big chair to think. Intuition told her she must not give up the case. Yet what else could she do? Suddenly she remembered something and thought, I still have another case. Edgar Nixon and the money stolen from Dad's registered letter. I can work on that. And that's the end of chapter 8. Interesting. Very interesting. This was another shorter chapter, which is fine. 61 to 68. I guess it's still like 8 pages. 8.5. 2 half pages. What is that? 7? Whatever. I do have some thoughts on this chapter though. Firstly, again, we get Nancy saving herself from the staircase. Did we have any doubt that she would escape harm? I certainly didn't. It's very obvious from all of the other clickbaity chapter enders that Nancy will not come to any harm. Nothing bad will happen to her. She will be completely fine. And then Tommy comes in, gives her the clue of the shoe, which is interesting. I wonder how the shoe will tie in later, or if it's just a red herring. In any case, our Deus Ex Machina Tommy, Detective Tommy, coming in with another random clue of a whole entire shoe that just randomly fell out of the truck or his car. What was Edgar Nixon doing that a whole ass shoe fell out of his trunk? That's what I want to know. Anyways, who knows? Chief McGinnis, like, don't bring that shoe down today. Bring it tomorrow. I guess it's already been contaminated with 100 other million fingerprints. So, were fingerprints a thing in 1930? I'm going to look it up. Dates back thousands of years. Yeah, but when did it actually become, like, of note? Developed the first system for classifying fingerprints, 1901. Okay. So police in the U.S. started using fingerprints in 1903. That's very interesting. So yeah. So they could have taken fingerprints from that shoe. Unfortunately, they would have also had to take fingerprints from Nancy, Tommy, and Billy to exclude them from the evidence. They would have found at the very least 4 sets of fingerprints on that shoe. Tommy, Billy, Nancy, and I would assume Edgar. I can't imagine him wearing gloves to handle his shoes, but who knows. And then Hannah is going to fix her dress. She'll just baste a new seam in the dress. NBD, no big deal. So easy to do. You can tell a man wrote this because no woman would be like, no problem, I'll just totally add a brand new seam into this dress. Do you know? This is an evening gown. Like, she's taking it to a dance. It's not just like a summer dress. I know they had sewing machines by now, but still, you don't just sew a new seam into a dress as if it's nothing. Sewers of YouTube, comment down below. Can you just, no problem, sew a super easy seam, brand new seam, into an evening dress for a dance? Let me know. I'm curious myself because I certainly couldn't do it. I sew, and I feel like that is not a super easy task. Even with my super fancy 21st century sewing machine downstairs. Anyways, rant done. Okay, on to the next, which is this very weird cable. what is a cable? Let's look it up too. What is a cable, message? A cable message refers to a diplomatic message sent between an embassy or consulate and its home government. What if I do 1930s? Electric telegraph is a point-to-point text messaging system primarily used from the 1840s until the late 20th century. It was the first electrical telecommunication system and the most widely used of a number of early messaging systems called telegraphs that were devised to send text messages more quickly than physically carrying them. Electric telegraphy can be considered the first example of electrical engineering. Text telegraphy consisted of two or more geographically separated stations called telegraph offices. The offices were connected by wires, usually supported overhead on utility poles. Many electrical telegraph systems were invented that operated in different ways, but the ones that became widespread fit into two broad categories. First are the needle telegraphs, in which electric current sent down the telegraph line produces electromagnetic force to move a needle-shaped pointer into position over a printed list. Early needle telegraph models used multiple needles, thus requiring multiple wires to be installed between stations. The first commercial needle telegraph system and the most widely used of its type was the Cook and Wheatstone telegraph, invented in 1837. This is a fascinating history lesson. In the early 20th century, manual operation of telegraph machines was slowly replaced by teleprinter networks, increasing use of the telephone pushed telegraphy into only a few specialist uses. Its use by the general public dwindled to greetings for special occasions. The rise of the internet and email in the 1990s largely made dedicated telegraphy networks obsolete. The electric telegraph led by Guglielmo Marconi's invention of wireless telegraphy, the first means of radio wave telecommunication, which he began in 1894. So I'm assuming that that's what they would have been using. Wild. I wish I could show this picture that is on my computer, but I cannot. Our history lesson of what is a cable, we have now learned. It's email in its infancy, but very, very cool. So Mr. Drew does tell Nancy about his cable that he received from Mr. Bates Jones. Nancy is obviously suspicious, especially because the mail was stolen. That was not mentioned here, but the mail was stolen by Edgar Nixon. And obviously, from what we could tell, the general public could use cables. When they call Mr. Bates Jones, he talks about this American detective agency that for a fee, they will tell us the secret whereabouts of the heiress. Does this not sound like the prince from India or Africa that's sending you an email asking for money? This sounds like how that started. Through cables to far off places, like the first scam emails being like, hey, I am a prince in X place in the world that's very obscure. Can you please send me money for whatever reason? This is like, hey, I'm an American detective agency, so if you just send me some money, I can totally find the heiress that you need. I have the information. Please just send me some money. Preferably in gift cards. Sorry. Okay. And obviously Nancy and her father are both very suspicious of this. Mr. Bates Jones doesn't know that the letter was stolen originally. They just asked for a second copy of it. Did nobody question that over at, aren't they supposed to be a law firm? I know there's different types of law though. I don't remember what type of lawyer Mr. Drew was. Anyways, these Mr. Bates Jones lawyers don't seem very bright, but I mean, this is electric communication across the ocean was new. People are still giving their like full home addresses to random strangers. Like what am I talking like? Of course, this random law firm is going to trust this American detective agency who wants to help them because, as he said, we have no reason to believe the firm is not telling the truth. Oh, how far we've come since then. There was a loud exclamation at the other end of the wire. Very interesting. But, like, why the loud exclamation? Finally, the London attorney said, "Thank you for your advice, Mr. Drew." Like, so rude. I guess he didn't have to say it in a condescending way, but it does just sound kind of condescending. Like, to ask these random strangers from across the ocean for their help to find this person, and then you randomly get notified by this whatever, like, American detective agency. Nancy and her father aren't asking for money to help them. They're doing this on their own time for completely free. This just feels like poor plot planning. The writer needed a reason for Nancy to not be on that case anymore, and so they just invented this American detective agency and was like, it's for children. They won't actually question whether it's legitimate or not. Or on the flip side, maybe it is supposed to be overly suspicious to give the child reader that feeding into their own cleverness, being like, no, I'm with Nancy. That definitely sounds suspicious. I do not trust this agency and I'm like with Nancy. So that when it does get found out later on that it was a ruse, you as the child reader can have your aha, I knew it moment. It could be that. I have to keep reminding myself that this book is for kids. The problem is I feel like this writer isn't giving kids enough credit, but again, it's also the 1930s. Like, what was this, 1932 I said? Something like that? I don't know what kids were like back then. All right, and then we end again not on a cliffhanger. Yay! I actually feel excited now when the chapter doesn't end on a cliffhanger. Mr. Drew said he must hurry off, and then Nancy remembers she still has another case, so no time to be sad about not looking for Nancy Smith Drew anymore because Edgar Nixon still stole that letter that had her dad's money in it, so that's still a crime. I honestly don't have a lot to say. There really wasn't a lot that happened in this chapter. It was so short. There was just that, like, really suspicious stuff. And there really isn't a whole lot to say. Like, it's a plot device to get Nancy off of it. The random shoe, I'm assuming, will come up in the later chapters. And we're almost halfway through the book. I don't know if you can see that. We're getting pretty close to the halfway point. So I feel like things are going to have to start picking up eventually. Chapter 9 next week. So if you would like to see what else I do around the internet, I have a link tree. I have a Patreon. My lowest tier is only $1.50 per month. If you support me for at least $5 a month, you get access to my Discord. I read spicier stories over there that I cannot post on YouTube. And yeah, check it out if you're interested. Otherwise, I will see you guys all next week for Chapter 9. Bye! Hello, this is Endcard Alley. Big thank you to all my patrons. Your support gives me the ability to pursue my passions. If you're not sure where to go from here, you can check out one of my other videos. There should even be a suggestion on screen right now. If you want to stay up to date, you can smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. I'm also part of the Arete Media Pantheon. I highly recommend you check them out at the link. They've got something for everyone if you're looking for something new to listen to. If you're a millennial like me, you might enjoy the Goosebumps podcast. There's Broadway, there's movies, there's even Star Trek. And with that, I will see you all in the next video.